Hmm. Give me a moment, folks. Okay. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Why does the Torah begin with God creating heaven and earth? Isn't the Torah about a guide for us on how to lead our lives? Start with the mitzvahs. Start with the first mitzvah, which is counting the months, knowing when the beginning of the month is, so you know when the holidays are of the month. But this is in order to tell us to the Jewish people the power of God. That God is creator, and he gave the land of Israel to who we decided initially, and that he wanted the Jewish people to have it, and therefore it should be theirs as an eternal home. All of Torah was turned around in order to speak about creation, in order that we, the Jewish people, should tell the world that God gave us this land. It's our eternal homeland, even though we weren't control of it for over 1900 years. It didn't take away the fact that it's our homeland. And till the Jewish people will be comfortable to say this, that it's God's chosen land that he gave to us. And that's why the prophets and the patriarchs and the matriarchs walked upon the land. Not because we just have a history there, because we have a God that gave it to us. That is the first and the basis of all our connection to the land. Welcome to Tanya today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We begin a very powerful letter from the Alter Rebbe. It's the 25th letter. He begins with Lahavin Imre Bina, to comprehend the words of understanding. In other words, the words of Torah. Let's understand it. That is based on what's called a book called Savos Harivash, which literally means the sort of like the testament of the Baal Shem Tov. Says the Alter Rebbe that in fact this is not his last will and testament at all. He didn't ordain a book should be written about his last will and testament, but what it means is it's gleanings of his teachings. A compilation, gathering, right, of his teachings. And here the Alter Rebbe is coming to defend one of his teachings that detractors, those who are not fond, shall we say, of the Hasidic movement, of the Baal Shem Tov, and 2 generations later, the Alter Rebbe, our teacher, right? So they took issue with something that he said, which in this letter, he doesn't even mention it. He doesn't even mention it. Now, the Alter Rebbe will later on give us greater clarification, but see, the compiler didn't translate something properly. From there, it became an issue. Now, what his statement was is that a heathen idolater, heathen, that acts in an evil way, it's coming from the hands of heaven. And we won't go into the details now. Later on we will, on what that means and where the mistake was, and right, that the Shekhinah dwelled within. But again, the Alter Rebbe doesn't even mention, he just mentions what he's going to come to explain. We'll get into it later, the actual teachings. But he says, first, to understand that teachings, we need to understand what our sages say in the Talmud, actually in the Zohar, I'm sorry, that whoever is enraged, is angry, resembles an idolater. What's the reason you would be like an idolater? Because the anger that a person displays is because they lost faith in God at that moment. And that's why they're angry. Because if you would believe that whatever happened is coming from heaven, you wouldn't get angry at all. Now, you might say, whoa, but the person has freedom of choice. Absolutely. The person has freedom of choice. Whether to curse, to strike another, cause damage to someone's property, and therefore they will be guilty for their choice by the laws of man and also by the laws of heaven for choosing evil. Absolutely. Right? In other words, the perpetrator can't claim, well, I'm merely an instrument of God because this is all providence from God. And therefore, I can get off scot-free. No, you can't. Doesn't work that way. Nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, a person that gets harmed, as difficult as it might be to understand, which we're going to go through and to get a clearer understanding, okay, this is all decreed from heaven. And God has many agents. Even though, we don't, excuse me. In other words, what came to the person was meant for the person by the proof that it happened to the person. It was decreed from heaven. So if it was decreed from heaven, why is that person responsible for fulfilling what heaven had decreed? It's because God has many agents. So this person who did the crime has to do the time because you didn't have to choose to do it. Someone else could have done it. Right? Furthermore, says the Alter Rebbe, not only that, not only does heaven grants permission that a person could bring suffering to another, but at that moment when the offender strikes or curses, in the offender, the force of God is found there. The breath of God's mouth that animates and sustains him is given from God. As it's written, it says about King David, God told Shimi to curse King David. And if you look, it doesn't say anywhere where he told him to do that, except the fact that it came up in his heart and his mind, Shimi, that he should curse King David. Where did it come up in his heart? Why did it come there? In his thought, that thought, God put it there. Now, we're going to go through a very lengthy explanation on what this means and how this happens, right? We're just setting the groundwork for it. But it's coming from God. And therefore, the thought that came in, and that thought, and the mouth that speaks, that Shimi's mouth that speaks, who gives it the power to do it? Only God. As I always say, we don't have a battery pack in our behind us that's making our mouths capable of speaking or raising our hand that we could, God forbid, hit somebody. We don't have, we're not self-propelled with that power. We can make the choice. And the choice we're responsible for. But the power to fulfill that choice, to bring it to fruition, is a power that God not only gave the thought, but gives the power to the hand that could make the strike. Now, you might ask the question, why would God do such a thing? Right? We'll get there. We'll get there. Very good question. Probably have more questions now than we have than we started with. And this is the meaning of the statement, for God told him, because at that moment when Shimei was speaking the words, curse David. Because God gave him the power of speech at that moment that he could do that. Now, that's the end of today's class. A cliffhanger. How do we understand that? And why would that be so? Why? Two very important questions we need to answer. And especially what's going on in Israel, the Holy Land. Painful to think that way. Very painful. But we're going to go through the process, and please stay tuned to understand how this is, how real this is, how true this is, by understanding the Alter Rebbe's teachings with Chabad, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And the important thing over here is, of course, how we deal with when we get cursed by somebody, hit by somebody, our possessions become damaged by somebody. Again, doesn't mean that, as what's going on now in Israel, you don't strike back. And that's not what it means. Actually, when you understand that the person had freedom of choice and they're responsible for that, and yet at the same time this is coming from God, the power for them to do it, right? So it means there's a message there. That's what's important to recognize. There's a message there. So what's the message? Okay, good question. We're going to get there. First, before we get to what the message is, we need a further understanding how indeed this is from God. How do we, how do we understand that? What does it mean it's from God? Stay tuned. Okay. Questions. Cherise has. You claim that you should not be angry that the rockets are attacking and atrocities against Israeli civilians by terrorists. No, I didn't say that. If you get angry because you are suffering, then you're not recognizing, right? right? I shouldn't say that. You person. Others, we're talking about what happens to you. We're not talking about how you should respond. We're talking about how you're accepting this. Someone says a nasty thing to you. Someone hurts you. So you understand that that's coming from God. Does that mean you don't respond? Yeah. But first recognizing it comes from God, then the response will be different. Anger because I got hurt, again, me got hurt, not someone else got hurt. Someone else got hurt, a different response. Right? Anger that I got hurt is saying that, well, was meant for me. Well, it was meant because it happened, and God is the one who allowed it to happen, and gave the power that it should happen. That's what we're talking about. Only that. If you're angry because of the atrocities, the barbarian ways of another to others, then yes, you're abhorred by the immorality. You're abhorred by the pain that others are going through. That's different. That's very different. You know, if someone hit me and I don't recognize that that's coming from God, that there's a message there, right? Again, that person's responsible. So here, the atrocities that are happening in Israel, they're responsible. They're responsible to such a degree that they need to be obliterated. Yes, harsh words, but that's what needs to be done with the terrorists. That there's nothing left of them. Period. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Not you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. The right thing to do. The godly thing to do. Is at this point, obliterate. That's the right thing to do. By the way, when that will happen to the terrorists right now, you know what's going to happen? We will come much quicker to peace. Because then people will recognize that you don't act that way. You don't do those things. Because this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And since we haven't done it till now, right, we've allowed terrorists to act the way they are acting. That's why we've come to this. If this would have been stopped earlier, there would be a lot less lives that have been lost. Not just now, the last 50 years. Because we need to do as God tells us in the Torah. And not to do what other people tell us, what the other nations, the UN tells us, and America tells us. We would have saved a lot more lives when we showed great strength. We wouldn't have to obliterate now if we showed the great strength previously. But this is what it's come to, unfortunately. Not something that we want to do. It's something we have to do. Something we have to do. So, yeah, so the response, absolutely. Here we're talking about what happens to you personally, right? Someone said something nasty to you. Someone did damage to your property. That came from God. Cherise, I hope that helps. Cherise, how are you doing? How's everybody doing? Okay, let's see. On Instagram, we have some questions. I keep wondering if what happened to Israel and Yom Kippur over the Mechitza contributed to this wrong thing. Oh, yes. Yeah, let's not, that's not our business. You know what contributed it? Is that we're not showing strength as a people, individually and collectively. The Rebbe said that if we will just show strength back in the day, that would be enough. Now we have to use the strength. Only because things got so terrible. Because we didn't show strength. We showed weakness. When you show weakness to evildoers, they take advantage. When you show strength, you can keep them at bay. How do we come to terms with fellow Jews who support enemies? I don't know. It's horrific. So, Jennifer, the emotion of anger, we need to deepen our faith in Hashem. So, to get angry at someone's immoral choice is different than get angry because I got my because I got some of my possessions damaged. Yeah, this is others. We really need to show the strength, and the Rebbe actually said that if we show strength, again, now it's gone to a point, it's a point of no return, an obliteration, right? But if the Israeli government would have listened to the Rebbe initially and show strength, the Rebbe said if we would show the strength, we'd only have to do that. And then it would save not only the lives of Jews in Israel, but of the Arabs. After all, they're created in the image of God too. But at this point, they've given no choice but obliteration of the terrorists. This. Okay. Okay. Elisha, you have another question that I didn't see. I want to tell you that our part right now, I don't see it, so we'll leave it right now. Our part, and this is very important, is to say prayers, Tehillim, Psalms. Say Psalm 20, 22, 69, 122, 150. From Jewish men, boys, 13 and over, put on tefillin. How we should give extra charity. We should give extra charity. Those are the things that we need to do. Right, to help the situation. In order that the hostages should be released. In order that there shall be the annihilation of the terrorists. Because that's what has to be done now. In order that there should be any peace, harmony, security for Israel, and ultimately even for its neighbors. And unfortunately, there's going to be collateral damage. But at this point, that's what has happened. There is no choice, because that's the only way you can get rid of evil, is those that surround the evil are also going to be. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Golda, we have to get Jews to study Torah. That's it. We learn, the more we'll learn Torah, the more we'll be imbued by God's truth, His wisdom, and that will give us the strength. And that will give us the strength. You know, the enemy wants to bring despair upon the Jewish people. So that's why they did such barbaric is using light terms. Please don't watch the videos. Just hearing how barbaric the terrorists are. They're not militants, not freedom fighters. They're not just barbaric. And you can't even can't call them an animal. Is it animal? First of all, got no choice. Right? Not animals. Don't put down animals by comparing these people to them. They're not human, they're demons. It's unfortunate that we have to say this. And in a sense we're responsible because we allowed their hand to do it. We helped them push the envelope because we allowed the envelope to be pushed. So now we're finally realizing, and the world's realizing it. That's why you don't see any leader saying anything about the devastation that is now being wreaked upon in Gaza. Because they recognize, because they did see the videos. They did see things that can't even talk, can't say. Still have nightmares and you won't be able to live. Yeah, be careful watching the news and what you're watching. To know that the terrorists are demons that need to be annihilated, I hope is obvious to all. I mean, I know that there are those who will not. But listen, we're not listening anymore. If we only listened to the Rebbe initially, it would never have come to this. It would be much more life and peace. But now, we are. All right, folks, we're going to continue with our conversation. We're going to continue with our conversation tomorrow. Please join us. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zurich and Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have an amazing day.